Look at that beautiful, beautiful cut of meat. That's what we're gonna make. Hello, welcome to my kitchen. Hey, today I'm gonna be making corned beef. So we're gonna be doing some preserving of meat. Now, I've really never done any meat preserving techniques on Texas Cooking Today, and I've been kind of looking forward to doing this. So this begins probably a little bit of a journey on some different meats. Now we're going to start with corned beef, and it is simple enough. I've got a big old brisket here, and I've got lots of ingredients. We're going to get this thing properly cured and seasoned so that when I cook it up, we're going to have a very, very special tasting beef. Now folks, if you've never had corned beef, you're in for a treat. And if you had corned beef and you're looking for one of those recipes to start making it, I think I have a real good starter recipe for you here. It's got very basic stuff and it'll get the ball rolling, so to speak. So please come this way and we'll take a look at what I have here, and we'll get started cutting the two muscles apart on this brisket, because I'm only going to use the flat. Not hard to do. Oh, before we get started on that though, please take a look at my description box. That's where you're going to see links to my website, and that's S.A.Trotter.com. That's where I have my recipes, also other Texas Cooking Today merchandise is there, as well as my services and other products that I provide. So take a look at that. It's really cool. Thank you for doing so. Also, down there with those links, you're going to see one for Patreon and for Wisio. If you're looking for a way to help out Texas Cooking Today, that's a great way to do it. So please look into those. I appreciate your help. And folks, thank you very much. Now come over here. Let's look at this and get started. Yeah. The ingredients I'm going to be using for our corned beef starts right up here. This is a big old slab of beef. In Texas, we call this a brisket. It's actually the pectoral muscle of your cow. All right, now we're going to use the flat. That's this front part up here. The point back here is a different muscle, and I'm going to remove those two. We're just going to brine this one. Now, brining, what do we do that with? I've got some curing salt right here, and this is a curing salt that contains both 5% or 0.5% of sodium nitrate and sodium nitrite. So it has both in there, as well as the sodium chloride. And I've also got some sugar here. This is a raw sugar. You can use brown sugar for this as well. I have some coriander, mustard seed, black pepper, and these are just plain peppercorns. And over here I've got some bay leaves. So once we get this separated, we're going to get busy curing, and this takes several days. So you're going to need a pan and a place in the refrigerator to keep this cold as it soaks in the liquid. Okay, folks, it is time to get busy separating our meat. Now I've gone ahead, pulled this out, dried it off. This has been wet aged for about 1 week, all right? So there is a slight darkening in the color of the meat. It's not quite as bold red as it used to be. And that's just part of that aging process. As the meat gets older, it gets a little darker, a little grayer. And that's just the way beef is. So that was the reason that's looking this way. Now, I've got two muscles. There's this guy right here, and then there's this muscle back here. And this muscle lays over the top of this one, kind of like so. So what I need to do is to separate the two on this fat band right along here that divides both of those muscles. And so you'll know where this thing comes from. When you're looking at a cow, you see this thing hanging down, okay? So if you look at the front of a cow, in between its front legs, at the base of his neck, you'll see two lobes hanging down, and this is one of those two lobes. That's their pectoral muscle, and that's the spot right there that you're looking at. So now you know what that is. Now I've got a lot of fat on this thing that doesn't really need to be here. So what I'm going to be doing is just carving that fat out as I go. And it shouldn't be much of a problem. But remember, briskets are very fat heavy. So you can be heavy-handed with carving this. Now here's the thing. We are not going for making barbecue here. So I'm not looking to keep a huge amount of fat. When you make barbecue, you want a thick layer of fat so that it renders down through that meat making it delicious. But if you're not doing barbecue, you need to get a cure into the meat. You need to move most of the fat out of the way, because afterwards we're probably going to boil this. You could boil it, bake it, do a lot of things with it, but I'll boil. Now, the other side, mostly fat, all right? And that's, again, we're going to be taking that out. Now, I've got a fairly large knife here. I could use something a little bit smaller. A fillet knife works well. Also, what works well is something like this, was just your basic utility knife. It has that thinner edge to it that'll just work its way right down through the meat without having a problem. See there? Now, if you cut a little bit here and there, please don't lose any sleep over that. All right? It's not enough to matter. A smaller knife like this will help you work your way over curves like this, where sometimes using a big chef knife, an area like this can be a little more challenging, okay? There. So that line here, what will I do? Push my knife into that. See all that deep fat? Do it again. Looky there. Let's get up high here. I'm trying to get this in such a way that you can see it real easy on video. I want you to see what's involved in removing one from the other, because they just aren't that hard. All right? So there is my brisket right there, and there is that point, and he comes down right across here. All right? There we go. That is the point, and that right there is your flat. This isn't a really difficult thing to learn to do, and the first time you do it, you may feel a little bit awkward or uncomfortable, and that makes sense. You know, that's the way it is when you do something the first time. Just don't be afraid of it. Remember, the meat's going to cook up the same. It's going to taste the same. Whether you make a cut across it like this and cut into it, oh dear, I cut into the meat, or not, all right? It's not going to hurt it. It's going to taste the same. So don't be afraid of doing something, making mistakes. That just happens, folks, so don't sweat it. Now I'm going to do a little final trim on this flat. The flat I'm going to be putting aside, because this is going to get frozen. I'm going to use it for something else, most likely barbecue, because I love to use this part of the brisket to make chopped beef. It's my favorite, and the flavor from it is incredible. Right now, it's ready to smoke. All of this fat, every bit of it, can be rendered for tallow. So you can take this, put it in a pot, cook it slowly, and then put it in the refrigerator. What comes to the top is good, clean, pure tallow. Now, I'll work on the rest of this. There we go. Because there is a lot of fat on this that I don't really want on here. After all, later on, I'm going to take this piece of meat and I am going to boil it. So it's going to be a whole different thing. Now, right back here, I've got a huge fat wedge. It was part of that wedge that ran in between the two cuts. So here I go, removing this sucker. Look at that. There's another one. And that fat wedge runs between sides. I got a little meat there, but not enough to worry about. So what we'll normally do after you do a trim like this is you dress the edges. And that's what you saw me doing right there. After you get that fat off, you just want the thing to look kind of pretty. And that's what they would do in a marketplace. And they would take what's left, the parts with meat, they would put into the grinder. And the parts that are tallow, markets usually sell that off to companies that use it, all right? There's a lot of products that involve the remainder of what's left over after curing or doing something like this. Now look at that, I've cut into it kind of rough. Let's see if I can smooth that up just a little bit. I can leave some of this fat on, it's not going to hurt it, but I just don't like the look of it. And like I said, when it comes to a corned beef, that fat isn't going to help anything. There we go, it's a little nicer, isn't it? All right, this is looking pretty good. I think it's going to corn very well. This meat right here got a little bit of fat running under it, and it's just a thick corner of fat right there. Look at that fat, big old honking hunk of it. That means I need to dress that edge. There we go. So you don't have to pretty up your edges if it's your own, you know, you just make it however you like. That side's ready. This side, it looks like it is about ready also. This little thin membrane that's on here, what they call silver skin, this one on the top side of this brisket isn't enough that really matters to life or the effect of the meat. If you want to remove it, you can, but it's not something that has to be taken out. That's not like that thick silver skin that makes something chewy or nasty. It's not that one. All right, this is ready to be corned. This is ready to be turned into tallow. All right, now I'm getting this pan ready to do my brining in, and this is my 4th quart, so it's 1 gallon of water I have there. Now to that I have my curing salt here, and that's 1 cup of curing salt that I'm adding in. All right. I want to make sure that is stirred. Sugar. And sugar is also a preservative, all right? So, you know, you hear of sugar curing or sugar cured hams. So the next thing here is my coriander and mustard seed right down in there. We have the bay leaves and black peppercorns. I do believe I'm ready to get my meat in here. So I'm seeing the water starting to clear a little bit. There's still some pockets of undissolved salts here. So I'm going to work those until I can get the water clear with none of that white on bottom. All right, here we go. Now meat has a tendency to float. Okay, and your meat's going to want to float up to the surface in a lot of cases. And especially in this case, because the water inside of the meat, the moisture in the meat is not as heavy as this water here that we've just filled with salt. It's loaded with sodium, it's mineral heavy, and that will cause the water to push into the meat along with the sodium and the sodium nitrate, and that way they will do their job. Something I'll mention, because it floats, you need something to push it down. So use a glass bowl or a ceramic bowl or plate. Avoid metals because you don't want anything reacting with this process, okay? A stainless steel will work fine, but it's usually not heavy enough. All right, get our bowl up here. Oops, there we go. Now you can set that either way you want. I like to do it like this. As long as it's holding it down, it's doing its job. So in addition, I want to cover this thing. All right, I think it's ready to go in refrigeration, and there it will stay until next week. Now if you want, you can rotate your meat once a day if you're worried about evenness of the saturation, and that doesn't hurt to do that, so please consider that. It has been, well, just seconds for you, but it's been a week for me, okay? So I have been waiting on this thing. I've been turning it occasionally, and so now I just need to open it up. We're going to get it out of the brine. I'm going to cut this thing in half because frankly it's bigger than the pot I'm going to be cooking in, all right? Okay, let's get this out of the brine here. Now my peppercorns are kind of stuck to the surface here. Not a big deal. As you see, I got a little pink here and here, but on the whole, it's not really everything it should be. So let's take a look here. So now, the inside has this nice, beautiful cherry red color. And that brown, that grayish brown seems to be only on the outside. What we're gonna do is we'll get this thing cooked up now. All right, it's in water now. Light my bottom burner there. Get that up and going. And I'm gonna get this to a good boil, all right? And before I put the lid on it, lower the temperature and let it simmer. Now something I wanna mention though, when you first start this, they have a tendency to, well, build some material on top. Let's take a look. You know what I mean by building some material on top? As the meat comes up in temperature, it's going to release some of that fat that's on the outside. It's also going to give off some of the salt that did not wash off when I was washing it in the sink just a moment ago. So a little of that's going to come up to the surface, and when it does, just take a spoon, skim it off of the surface of the water, and dispose of it, all right? You don't need to keep that. And if it cooks back down into the meat, it doesn't do it any favors, okay? It can actually cause bittering to the meat if you leave it in there to boil in. So we remove that from the top, and it actually improves the quality of the product, plain and simple. Now, cover it so it'll come up in temperature quicker. Give it time. All right, let's take a look at this. Now, we're just starting to develop steam, and that's when you're going to start to see this little buildup starting to happen. Now, it's not really very bad on this one. Sometimes it'll be thick and foamy and frothy and billowy, and that definitely needs to come out of there. But what you'll do is you'll just reach in, you'll just take that and remove that stuff right there. All right, now this is starting to come to a boil, and this is what I'm talking about right here. See that? How it's got kind of a mucky color to it. That we're going to go ahead and remove. Now once this comes to a boil, it's not going to be an issue. This just happens at the very beginning of the cook, all right? Once it's over, it's over. Okay, about a half a teaspoon black pepper. About a half a teaspoon of mustard seed. And a bay leaf, all right. So we've got everything in there. This just needs some time to cook, all right? So that's what we're going to give it. Now I'm going to be setting my my timer. We're going to start it at 2 hours, and I'll probably check it before the end of that. But generally, this takes a few hours to cook, so just be patient. And what we're looking for is to be able to push a fork into our meat and it slip out easily. That's when it's actually fork tender. Now this has been cooking for 2 hours, and I said that we were going to check the meat for fork tenderness at that point. And I have checked it earlier. I checked it about the 1.5 hour mark. Wasn't quite there. It was very firm still. Now I can tell by pushing my fork into that, it's still quite firm. You see how it hangs onto the fork? It's slowly sliding off, which means it's getting there, but it ain't there yet. So we keep it right here in the water. Keep it cooking. I'm going to give that some more time. Okay, this has now been 3 hours in here, and that's kind of normal on a corned beef, all right? Most of them that I've ever cooked are going to be this cut right here, which is brisket, and that usually takes around 3.5 hours to cook them up. Whoop, that just slid right off of my fork. Oh yeah, that one came off pretty easy too. So what I'm doing is I'm calling this good because that meat has now gotten tender. It looks beautiful. It's got a nice pink hue to it. I think we got us some corned beef ready to go here. Now, I would like to mention This broth, don't throw it out. That's what you cook your cabbage and your potatoes, and if you want carrots in there, all right? That's what you cook your stuff, all right, to go with this corned beef and cabbage kind of a meal if you're doing that. Now, I like corned beef a lot of different ways, and so just corned beef and cabbage isn't always good enough for me. And today I'm thinking I might even do a Reuben sandwich. Who knows? But that is another video if I do it. Right now though, let's take a look at this, see what we've got, cut it open, and find out if it tastes the way it should. Oh yeah. Now, here's what I wanted to show you earlier. When you put a fork in it, see how that fork comes back out? All right, boom. This is what we're looking for. That's what we call fork tender. And of course the broth here, fantastic stuff for cooking your veggies. It has great flavor and it's something you should really enjoy. Let's just take one and take a look. All right. Now the quantity of everything I used today started here. It was with the brisket. This isn't a big brisket. It's somewhat smallish actually. So it's not one of the bigger ones, but it works great for this. Any size brisket you want, all right? And I recommend using just the flat. For that, we used 1 gallon of water, 1 cup of curing salt with the curing agents added, the sodium nitrate and sodium nitrite. Otherwise, use 1 cup of sea salt and 2 tablespoons of pink salt. This is 1/2 a cup of sugar. Right here we had 1 tablespoon of coriander, 1 tablespoon of mustard seed, 1 tablespoon of the black pepper. Actually, I think I got just slightly more, but it's roughly a tablespoon, and 4 bay leaves. All right, that's all there was to it. Now, we have this out of our water, and we're gonna look inside, see what we got in the way of delicious corned beef. Now, I would note, the grain of the meat is running just like this, and you can see it quite clearly, these lines. So we always want to cut across the grain, right? And that way we end up with a much more tender, delicate thing that we're working with. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? All right, look at this, folks. Look at that beautiful color in there. And it is that way all the way to the middle, which means that we got full brining all the way through. The big question, what does it taste like? Oh, man. That is good corned beef right there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there it is. It's all finished up. We have made a beautiful corned beef. It's got the right flavor. It is beautiful in its color. That's what we were looking for. Oh, yeah. So delicate. Just pulling apart. You gotta try this. Oh, this is really delicious. The flavors are perfect. And I'll say this, it doesn't have quite as chemically flavor as the one that you get commercially made. Okay, so I like that. Great corned beef flavor, not quite as briny or salty, just dead on perfect. This is going to make some good eats today. Now, folks, if you'd like to do corned beef and cabbage, that's done with, you know, these guys, potatoes and your beautiful head of cabbage. Quarter your potatoes, put them in there first. 10 minutes in and simmering, add a quartered head of cabbage. All right, also your carrots can go in with the potatoes. Cook them all together about another 15-20 minutes. Boom, guess what? You've got corned beef and cabbage. Everything's nice and tender and delicious. And that's all it takes to do that stuff. So don't be afraid of just throwing it on in that same brine that you cooked the meat in. That's the pot you cook the veggies in. That's the way it works. And it's good. Enjoy this recipe. Thank you very much for watching. Please take a look in my description box. That's where you're going to find links to S.A.Trotter arts, and that is S.A.Trotter.com. That's where my recipes are. I have those in PDF format right there. You can download them. And also, I have aprons, caps, shirts, and other stuff. So please, take a look at what I have on my website. Do take a look at my Patreon if you're interested in helping out with Texas cooking today. Join me on Wisio. Help me out on Patreon. And folks, thank you very much for watching. Please enjoy your corned beef. I'm gonna make me a sandwich. Oh, that's another video.